Welcome to South Coast Working, the voice of working people and those who continue to build the South Coast each and every day. From the docks to the mills to the classrooms to the roadways, working people add a voice and life to southeastern Massachusetts. Brought to you by the UMass Dartmouth Arnold M. Dubin Labor Education Center.
Welcome to South Coast Working. I'm Kim Wilson.
And I'm Jim Snow.
On today's episode, we're talking to Massachusetts AFL-CIO President Chrissy Lynch.
She's been at the job for over a year now, so we decided to check in and see how it's going and what her vision is for the next few years.
Let's get into it.
So, President Lynch, you've been on the job for well over a year now. How's it going? We want to check in with you.
Hey, Jim. Hey, Kim. Great to see you. It's going well. There is a lot going on, but it's been a lot of fun to try and tackle some of the really unprecedented crises before working people today, whether it's through climate change and the impacts of that on work, or rapidly evolving technology, or the new oligarchy running the United States government. It's a great honor and challenge to be at the helm during this time.
So we've been hoping to get you on this podcast, and we're looking maybe for a quick career background on you and maybe your family, your education, how you got where you are. Give us the lowdown.
Sure. Well, I guess like many, I started working, I guess at like 14 and a half. That's the legal age. I spent all my time through high school and college actually working as a barista. I spent a couple summers as a personal care attendant, and I sold swimming pool supplies and vegetables. And I've been misclassified as a server for a catering company. I've waitressed, I've bartended. I've spent some years running, union-led political campaigns in Massachusetts and California. That was all kind of before I had a union card. Let's face it, like coffee shops and personal care attendants, restaurants, campaign staff, they did not have unions back then. So I really did experience what it was like in the non-union sector, and it kind of gave me the passion to fight for workplace change. But it was through campaigns that I actually felt I met the labor movement, working to elect labor champions. And I knew at that point that the labor movement was kind of where I wanted to be. It kind of gave me an outlet for some of the anger and the frustration that I had from my years, working on the whether it's the restaurant floor or in somebody's home as a PCA, and some of the frustrations I had. So ultimately, when the AFL-CIO called me and offered me, or they encouraged me to apply, I should say, for the job at my first job here was political and legislative coordinator. It was really a life-changing opportunity, to actually get paid and have health care, and a pension to do something that I felt so passionate about. And I've been here since. I've done just about every job here. I've done our communications. I've helped staff our workforce development department. I've been political director. I've been legislative director. I've been chief of staff. I've been secretary treasurer. And as Jim, you said, I became president in 2023. I've worked during that time for 2 different Mass AFL-CIO presidents, and I guess 3 national AFL-CIO presidents, each of whom had very different styles and I think approaches to the work. And, I'm also, I value very much my experience as a former steward of my staff union here at the Mass AFL-CIO, OPIU Local 6. I am now on the other side of the table as management from when I was secretary treasurer and still now as president. So I do think I have a pretty good perspective from both sides of the table. And, I spent a year and a half in the trenches with the building trades unions as their director of operations, helping them to advance programs to bring more equity and inclusivity into the unionized construction sector, and really diving into a sector that is very unique among all the sectors. And, during that time, throughout all of this relative to my education, I actually went to school for journalism. That's what my bachelor's degree is in. And I realized in my first journalism internship, I was way too opinionated to be a journalist. And that was actually how I fell into campaign work. And since then, I've gone to UMass Amherst, trying to take advantage of our state's fabulous network of labor centers. I got my master's degree there. I've done the Harvard Trade Union program. I really try. And one of the things I love about the labor movement is that you learn something new every day. And if you're not, you're doing something wrong, because there are so many unions and each union has such a unique set of opportunities and threats before it that it's important. I see something. Every issue, an issue that I've been familiar with for years, talking to a different union about it, you learn a different viewpoint on an issue you're very familiar with every day. So I really do try and savor that and learn from it every day. That was a long-winded answer.
Yeah. Well, how do you keep from being exhausted? I mean, at the end of a stretch.
Coffee, a lot of coffee. Yeah. I mean, I have two little kids. My kids are 8 and 10, so I keep busy. I'm running on fumes,
Evidently.
You have made a mark as the first woman to lead the state AFL-CIO. Talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, I just mentioned my kids, and respectfully to my predecessors, I think I'm the first president who's not had somebody at home taking care of things at the house while they work. So it is, honestly, it's a struggle to balance all of it. I'm very lucky. I have a very supportive spouse, and my kids, they don't know any different. So they're just used to me working all the time. But, I would say I mentioned I worked for the last 2 state Fed presidents. So it's very clear to me sometimes when I can see that maybe I'm being approached differently than perhaps they would have been. I think as a woman leader, I do try and over-prepare for things. I've always been that way, but I think that women, by and large, do that a lot. I expect to be underestimated by people. I actually very much enjoy people when they say, oh, you work at the AFL-CIO, and oh, what do you do there? And when I say I'm the president, they're like, didn't see that covered, But look, I'm really proud to be here. When I first started at the Mass AFL, there were very few women in the space. A lot of our members are women, but when you look at the leadership of the unions and some of the top staff in the unions, there wasn't much diversity there. And I'm really happy to say that in the last 20 years, I've seen not only our unions, their membership become more diverse, but the leadership as well. And I'm just really thankful to those women who came before me. When I first started, I would really look at them in awe. They taught me how to have kind of the thick skin and the sharp elbows needed to kind of get through this space. And I also am really thankful for a lot of male allies that I had, who brought me into their fights, who had my back all the time, and who really went out of their way to, help me learn and become a stronger advocate. I feel like I'm ready for this job now because of decades of investment that the labor movement, each individual leader has put into me. I mean, I've got a lot of mentors out there, and a lot of them probably don't realize it.
I know exactly what you mean. Would you encourage other young women to be involved?
Oh, 1,000%. I mean, especially now with some of the threats that I feel from some of the right-wing corporate power out there, it threatens not just my status as a working person and as a union member, but also as a woman. And we know that the best way to, eliminate the gender pay gap is through a collective bargaining agreement. And that the best way to give women the economic empowerment and security is through a union contract. And I've been really fortunate and so fulfilled by some of the work, especially with the building trades that we've done, to see how much access to those careers in the building trades can really change people's lives, can really pull them out of poverty. So yes, I am very much in support of more women getting into our unions. And I think it's very important for unions to be deliberate about bringing in more women. And I'm very proud to say that. I think everybody is.
I don't think that story is out either, by the way. And I think you probably agree that we don't get the notice for what we're doing. And that's frustrating.
Yep.
So what's been the toughest part of your job?
I would say we're a very big tent. The labor is not a monolith. One union's opinion does not reflect all of labor. And I have to spend a lot of time. Each union is certainly autonomous to do what it wants. I'm not a big pinky ring wearing labor boss. I don't command unions to do what I think makes sense. I do try and keep folks rowing in the same direction. I do try and identify the points of alignment between unions where there's shared threats and there's shared opportunities. I try and rally around those things rather than the points of conflict. So the points of conflict are important as well, because sometimes I see my role as a facilitator sometimes of tough conversations. I would say that's a very tough part of a job, but I do kind of enjoy it. Sometimes even if you can't get two unions to agree, sometimes at the end of the conversation, they may agree to disagree, but they at least walk away with a better understanding of where the other one is coming from. But, I would say generally the toughest part that I'm experiencing has been the politics of, political campaigning and trying to be diplomatic and working with elected officials. We're in a Democratic trifecta state, and the platform of the Democratic Party is a very strong pro-labor platform. I think we're all frustrated. I think the election showed us how frustrated folks are, that I think some of those parts of the platform are a little dusty. And we need the Democrats prioritizing those things. I don't think it's a either or working class issues or social issues. I think it's both. And I think that corporate interests have managed to kill a lot of working class priorities behind closed doors. And I'm very interested in partnering with elected officials to end that dynamic. But, that can get tricky too, because for every union that might be angry with a given elected official for some issue, there are always other unions that are happy with that elected official. We try and represent all the unions. So our response to everything needs to be balanced really by what everybody is experiencing. And that can be hard. I can't effectively have conversations with lawmakers if all I'm doing is telling them they're not doing good enough. And similarly, I can't expect real progress with lawmakers if we're telling them they're doing such a great job for working class people, when in reality, they're only helping one segment of our workforce. So, I think it behooves all of us, for elected officials, to see the AFL-CIO as a place they can go to ask questions, to better understand our issues and our priorities. And the AFL-CIO being too nice or too punitive kind of threatens our ability to play that role. So finding that middle spot, not just reacting to stuff instantly, it's very challenging, but it's very, very important. And I know it is a balance that I'm working really hard to strike, because I want to get some wins for workers.
Well, that was my next question. Is I would love to hear about one of your biggest victories.
I would say, a few years ago, we really didn't know what the labor movement, what our angle was around the climate change conversation. Certainly we represent tens of thousands of workers who touch energy, some who, are part of what will be the electrification of a lot of our energy grid, and many who have spent decades in their whole careers in the traditional gas-based energy that has lit our homes and our hospitals and our workplaces for decades. And they're really scared, understandably. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And that was one of the instances where I had to facilitate a tough conversation, because, we couldn't be put in inertia because there wasn't consensus among the AFL-CIO unions. You know the phrase, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So we worked really hard at the Mass AFL to get the union to really touch the energy space into a room together, to find some points of alignment so that we could at least go to the table and fight for worker standards to make sure that green jobs are good union jobs. And we were able to do that by fostering those conversations. And now we've got a unified agenda. We don't agree on everything, but we did find the things that we agree on. And we've been able to pass some legislation in the last session that really started us down a path of ensuring some of these green jobs are going to be good jobs, and that we're taking care of the gas workers who will be impacted at some point as our state transitions to more renewable energies. So that's one of the things I'm most excited about.
Thank you so much for that.
You could easily be the Secretary General of the United Nations in the role that you play, because it's not easy. I mean, those people are firm in their expectations, and you got to figure out how to manage that, and it's not easy. Not easy. I might add, just on the issue of diversifying the labor movement, you have a terrific woman who's leading the national labor movement now. So it's a great thing. We were going to ask you what the toughest external issue is for you in terms of being a leader of the federation. But that leads into the whole situation that we're dealing with, as you've described it, the oligarchy that's run the country. So, I mean, I don't know if you would classify those issues as foremost, but certainly they're up there.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been around for that long, but it's been about 20 years that I've been working with labor now, and I've never felt such a threat to our membership and everything we stand for as I do now from the federal government. And being in Massachusetts, we're lucky in many ways because we have a federal delegation here that is very pro-worker. We don't have to worry too much about where they are. We know that they're going to be pushing back on whether it's Trump-Musk attacks on the National Labor Relations Act, or whether it's them handing our personal data over to big tech corporations. We know that we have a delegation that's with us. So one of the things that we've been trying to do, given that really scary federal dynamic, so that we feel like we have some power here in Massachusetts, that's not just yelling at buildings. I think it's important to give people that outlet, but at the end of the day, unless we have laws that protect us, it's not going to help. So one of the things that we've done is we actually wrote legislation here in Massachusetts, that's state legislation that would kind of inoculate our state's union members a little bit from any federal attacks on the National Labor Relations Act. So it gives us the ability to play both defense and offense here in Massachusetts. And we got very creative. I'm very proud of our policy team for drafting this, because we looked at some of the best parts of the PRO Act, for example. For anybody who doesn't know what the PRO Act is, the PRO Act was our kind of marquee federal labor law reform. I don't think it's happening now, at least for another 4 years. But, the National Labor Relations Act, as much as we want to protect it, it was written in the 1930s before there was email or virtual workplaces. I mean, it's a completely different landscape now. And that the National Labor Relations Act needed some serious reforms to start to level the playing field a little bit for union organizing. So we tried to take some of those components and put it into this bill so that we're able to play both defense and offense at the same time. And I'm really proud of our staff and all of our affiliates who worked with us to craft that legislation.
That's a great idea. And that's been circulating, and you appear to be well ahead of the thinking that's emerging now. So how do we make the labor movement more effective here? Organizing the work you're doing, bringing in new affiliates. How's that going to work?
Well, here at the Mass AFL, we just created less than a year ago what we're calling a contract campaign and organizing hub. And that's where we really want to help be kind of a connective tissue between unions who are, organizing in their big organizing campaigns and in their contract fights. But we also want to make sure we're tying that work more effectively to our political programs and our legislative programs. So nothing's happening in a silo, so that they're all connected. I think a lot of it is also just keeping on having some of these tough conversations and not being afraid to dig in where there is conflict. Given the federal landscape that we just talked about, I want to talk for a minute about, I think, the vital importance of unions as being trusted sources of information, because there is so much misinformation out there and our members see it constantly. And we as union leaders and union members, unions need to do a better job. And this is where I think the role of the labor centers can come in to really filter through that. Nobody wants to be told who to vote for. We need to have a better cycle of year-round education that is based on reality, that is based on the issues that our members care most about, that doesn't use acronyms like EFCA. Jim, you remember we spent years talking about EFCA, the Employee Free Choice Act, right? And, in retrospect, I think about it and I'm like, we should have just called it, the freedom to join a union. Like we sometimes get so muddled in our own jargon that I think we lose a lot of working class people who, when they hear about the outcome of this wonky process we're talking about, they agree with us. But when we talk about it only in wonky process terms, they got other stuff to think about. So we need to get better at that, because there is so much lies coming out there. The corporate right is going to keep trying to divide workers up by race and by gender and by immigration status. to keep us fighting with each other while they run off with all the profits. I see the union movement as a critical backstop to stopping that, but we've got to do better at talking to our members, not about who they should vote for, but about the issues that are important.
That's a great statement.
Well, I would say that at the part of the labor program, I'm here at UMass Dartmouth, and there are 3 other campuses, UMass campuses that are available and would like to even, do more to build the labor movement. And I like what you had said around talking about the issues, and that's something that we would love to do more work around and develop more curriculum. I mean, there's already a lot out there, but figure out how to really disseminate that information. The conversations are the most important piece, what we can do. And I think that, we really need to get together and see our common interests. And I'm just wondering what you would think of as other things that the UMass campuses, the labor extension, the labor centers can do to help build the labor movement.
One of the things I think all sectors need to get better at talking with our members, and frankly, Democrats need to get better at is naming corporate greed and helping people understand it. The cause of inflation isn't people collecting SNAP benefits. It's corporate greed, right? It all comes back to corporate greed. And I think we all need to get better at how we're talking about that. A specific thing though, Kim, I would say is, there's UMass labor centers across the state. Massachusetts is very lucky to have such a strong network. And we have over 800 local unions here. We have just about 500,000 union members here. Some kind of, and I know that we've already been working with you all a bit on this, but some kind of survey, that really gauges where unions and their members are at. What are the issues that matter most to them? What do they see as the biggest threats? What do they see as the biggest opportunities? We have these conversations and we make those connections kind of anecdotally, but, having actual quantifiable data in front of us with some kind of sophisticated survey you all put together could actually be, I think, really helpful to get a really true beat on where the leaders are, where the members are, and give us those points to dig in on.
Thank you. I know right now we're doing a survey to find out what kind of training people need. I know that you're talking more deeper about if you don't identify the issues, how are you going to make a plan to effectively take on what you're trying to do?
And how do we identify those issues by sector too? What matters most to a janitor might not matter most to a nurse or a firefighter, So we've really got to get sector specific, I think, and then suss out the common threads within each sector. And then hopefully we also find a common thread that runs through sectors. And that's what we really dig in on.
Do you have any thoughts on the labor movement down here in the South Coast? Anything that occurs to you about our geography?
Well, President Trump has the ability to kill a lot of good offshore wind jobs. And there's already been a project to build a cable. I forget the specifics, but it was going to be a boon for down there. That's killed because very swiftly in just the last month. So I think that maintaining the offshore wind industry down there is going to be really, really important. We're really proud that we've got thousands of members to work on offshore wind right now, and the projects that we've got going, I think, are safe from federal attacks. But I think it's really important that we keep these new industries going down there and figure out how we can support them.
Well, we've taken up a lot of your time. Did we miss anything? Anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe the last thing I would touch on that is very front and center in my mind that I've been in meetings all day about today is the impact of rapidly evolving technology. Trump has already handed over the reins to the White House to big tech corporations. In President Biden's farewell address, he warned that these unfettered artificial intelligence and unregulated artificial intelligence could really wreak havoc on our society. Data-driven technologies like AI, I think they're going to dramatically reshape work across sectors in the coming years. I think it can be both good and bad. But without public policy and collective bargaining agreements that protect job quality and civil rights and consumer rights, the potential harm for working people is really, really vast and somewhat dystopian. Not to over-exaggerate it, but I am really, this is really front and center for me. Everybody probably remembers the SAG-AFTRA and the Writers Guild of America strike a couple years ago. You know, this was a main topic when you have artificial intelligence literally taking the jobs of writers, literally taking the jobs of background actors. And some people might think, oh, I don't have any sympathy for Hollywood. But if you don't think that same phenomenon can impact your job, you're wrong. It could impact all sectors. And President Biden did pass some decent regulations around how AI can be used, and those are already gone. Musk and the Doge has already given away a ton of data of workers that's been essentially handed over to tech companies. Here in Massachusetts, we've introduced legislation which we think is even more important in the wake of the federal government having no regulations that would help protect workers from having machines and algorithms and artificial intelligence stealing and dehumanizing their jobs and their privacy. You know, we should all be really concerned about this. No sector is immune to it. Some jobs will be augmented. That's the optimistic word that people use. Some jobs will be automated, but AI will impact everyone. So we should also everybody should be looking at language in their collective bargaining agreements that protects their members, that makes sure that worker voice is part of how technology is used in our jobs. We don't want to be anti-technology. I think some of it could be used for the greater good to solve diseases and identify problems before the human eyes can, but we can't take the human touch out of it. And we can't take the human worker out of the equation. And we will be spending a lot of time this legislative session trying to fight for laws that do that.
Well, I think we want to thank you. I really appreciate your time. This has been great. A lot to chew on what you've said.
Good luck with all of it. You got your hands full.
Thank you, Jim. Glad to have you both on the team.
For more information about the work of the Massachusetts AFL-CIO, check out their website. And to learn more about the Labor Education Center and to get involved, reach out. We'd love to hear from you.